Wilson. Thanks for coming in.
Well, thank you for the invite, sir. I have to admit, I'm still getting used to the new look.
They said lose the mustache or lose the election. You and I haven't always agreed in the past, but I want to make another run at making Captain America an official military position.
And if we disagree on how to manage a situation, then what happens?
Work with me, Sam. We'll show the world a better way forward. Global power is shifting. You're just a pawn. You may be Captain America, but you're not Steve Rogers.
You're right. I'm not.
Welcome back to the channel, everyone, where we love talking about movies and more. I'm your host, Mason Phillips, and today I finally have a review for you for Captain America Brave New World. Getting this video to you a little late, hit some snags last week, but finally catching back up on all these reviews I need to get out for you guys. So before we get any further in this video, I ask you guys to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you get notified when new videos go live on this channel. When you guys do that, it always helps me out, and I greatly appreciate it. Now, let's talk about the plot.
Sam finds himself in the middle of an international incident after meeting with President Thaddeus Ross. He must soon discover the reason behind a nefarious global plot before the true mastermind has the entire world seeing red.
All right, so what was good about Captain America Brave New World? This movie is all over the place. I'm going to say that there is some good to this movie. I did enjoy elements of this film, and it's one of the better Marvel movies in the last couple of years. You know, I still really love Deadpool and Wolverine. This doesn't hit the heights of Deadpool and Wolverine. This doesn't hit the heights of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 or Shang-Chi or No Way Home, but it's 10 times better than Thor Love and Thunder. It's so much better than Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. It is by far better than the Marvels. Those movies just disappointed me to no end. I wanted so much out of those films, and they did nothing to excite me. I had some fun with Quantumania, but it wasn't the movie I wanted. Thor Love and Thunder was just joke after joke. Didn't want to take itself seriously at all. I was expecting it to be funny. You know, I liked Ragnarok, but that movie was just not quite what I think we wanted out of a Thor film. And the Marvels, that was just one of those post-COVID movies where they were just trying to rush the production. I don't think it came together the way that they wanted it to, the way that it should have. Brave New World comes out of this post-Endgame, COVID, Bob Chapek, Disney ran era where it was quantity over quality in the MCU. Wanted to get a lot of stuff on Disney Plus, wanted to get a lot of movies in production, rush all these things into production, didn't really take time to get the scripts right, get the right talent in as far as the writers and the director. This is an unproven director. The guy who directed The Cloverfield Paradox, which is a very poorly received film. It was announced at one of the Super Bowls, and then it was released on that day and was not received well at all. So this was an unproven director. The writing team from The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and that show actually was better for me than this movie was. I had a lot of fun with this movie, but it was an unproven writing team because that was a very uneven show. It wasn't the strongest. I mean, it's not the same writing team. It's not Marcus and McFeely like with the other Captain America movies. It's not the same team like the Russo brothers or even Joe Johnston with the first Avenger. So I wanted so much more for Anthony Mackie because he really deserves to have this role. I think he is one of the better parts of the MCU. I've loved him ever since The Winter Soldier, and I wanted a better first outing for him. Yeah, we had him as Captain America in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but as far as on the big screen as Captain America after Endgame, after Steve passes the shield over to Sam, I wanted him to have a better outing than this. There is a lot of good to this, but it's just a very mixed and muddled film. We'll get into that in the mixed and negative section, but I wanted something so much more for him, but Anthony Mackie is a standout here. He is unfortunately overshadowed by other people in the film. I think he's really just the driving force behind the movie, but we're focusing so much more on Ross. This movie is essentially a sequel to The Incredible Hulk. That's one of the things I really did enjoy about it, is we're finally paying attention to films that have come out a long time ago. We're paying stuff off all the way back from 2008 when The Incredible Hulk came out with that movie. Now, of course, we did lose William Hurt, who was supposed to play Ross in this film. Unfortunately, he passed away, so they got Harrison Ford to replace him. So the character of Ross continues on, but there's a lot of great surprises, a lot of great connections to The Incredible Hulk. One of the movies I really enjoy. It's the black sheep of the MCU. It's kind of seen as separated, but I really like that movie, and so I like that we're finally calling back to a lot of the stuff from The Incredible Hulk. A lot of the stuff that was established, we're continuing forward with that. That's the stuff that I really enjoyed about this movie, the connection to the broader MCU. You know, we're paying attention to the Eternals. We're talking about the Celestial, the Tiamat that came up out of the ocean. Celestial Island, they talked about adamantium in the trailer, so that's the metal that goes onto Wolverine's claws. Greater connections to the mutants and everything going on in the MCU. So that's really cool that we're talking about stuff that we've set up, and it's like the people behind this film thought, we got to finally start paying this stuff off because we have so many loose ends out there, be it in post-credit scenes or stuff that was set up in other films that we just haven't talked about. Let's bring in all these things from The Incredible Hulk way back in 2008. Let's bring in stuff from the Eternals that we set up a couple years ago that we just haven't talked about since. Like, there's this big mass celestial in the ocean. We're not going to talk about that at all. The fact that this is a film that it talks about like the political global climate of what's going on in the MCU, it was the perfect time to talk about that kind of stuff, and I'm glad they finally addressed that. And the standout thing for me is Harrison Ford as Ross. We go through this great character arc with him where he's wanting to show the world, and more so show his daughter Betty Ross, that he is a changed man. He's not the same guy who was chasing the Hulk. You know, he's called the Hulk Hunter. He's not the guy who was chasing the Hulk in The Incredible Hulk. He's not the same guy who signed on for the Sokovia Accords in Civil War. He's not the guy who's hunting down Black Widow in the Black Widow movie. He's a different person. He wants to show the world, and he wants to show his daughter that he's changed. He wants to leave a better lasting legacy for what he's done on this planet, and not just be this angry, hardened general, that he's actually a changed person. He has compassion to himself. He's willing to change. He's willing to do stuff for the greater good. He's becoming more selfless, and he's having to fight that dual side to himself. You know, it was revealed in the trailer, so this isn't a spoiler, but there is the element of the Red Hulk in this, and that's the stuff that's building through the entire thing. I wish they didn't reveal that in the trailers because it's meant to be a big surprise in the movie, but they did unfortunately reveal it in the trailers. I get it. You wanted to push the marketing, push that forward. I understand. And were they going to keep that a secret? Probably not be able to keep that a secret, but I wish they would have done more to kind of hide those scenes. Honestly, what you've seen in the trailers is pretty much what you get in the movie. So I wish that they had saved a lot of that for the film and not pushed so much of that Red Hulk stuff into the marketing. That's where I think they really dropped the ball. But Harrison Ford is the best part about this movie. He was my favorite part. The Red Hulk stuff aside, that was a cool fight sequence, but Harrison Ford as Ross, he was a standout for me. I really enjoyed his role in the film. Again, I liked Anthony Mackie, but I think he's kind of sidelined in his own movie, weirdly enough. He does great. He does what he can with the role. People have complained that it's more of Sam seeing himself as not worthy of being Captain America. I didn't really get that in this movie. I felt like he was in this role. Like, he felt like he was Captain America finally. He's not questioning whether or not he should be Captain America like he was in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Felt like he dealt with that in the show. He's moved on. He's completely Captain America at this point. And not the super soldier, but like kind of a guy who doesn't need to be the super soldier. He can kind of stand above that and stand outside of that. And they talk about that a little bit. He does have doubts about whether or not he should have taken the serum, about whether or not he should have gone the way of Steve Rogers and all these other guys like Isaiah Bradley, but realizes he doesn't have to have that as an aspect of him. He's fine as he is. He's fine being the Captain America that Steve saw him to be and saw him as, and doesn't have to live up to all these other standards. So there is nice messaging in there as that he doesn't have to go outside of his moral code. He doesn't have to go outside of the values that he lives by. He can stay true to who he is as Sam Wilson, as the person that Steve fought alongside and Steve entrusted to pass on the mantle of Captain America. So that's a great messaging. It's kind of lost in the weeds with everything else. Harrison Ford was great in this. I even thought that the new Black Widow character was also a great addition to this as well. She was fun to watch, especially when she gets into those action fight sequences. I think she had some of the best action in this entire film. So that was really cool to see as well. The chemistry between Joaquin Torres and Sam Wilson. It's this new dynamic between the new Captain America and the new Falcon. So it's cool to see their relationship continue to flourish and to see Joaquin step into the role as the new Falcon. I liked seeing that too. Isaiah Bradley, he was a great addition to this. I think he was a little underutilized and I wish they would have used him more in the film, but it was nice to see him in this as well. And I think that they used his character as good as they could. Again, they could have done more with him, I think, but what they did with him in this movie I thought was also really well done. The Forgotten Captain America. It's a very interesting plot line that I hope that they go into even further down the road in the MCU and don't just kind of leave it here, because I think there's a lot more to do with this character, and I hope that they address him more in the future and use him more in the future, because Carl Lumbly is great. I've loved him ever since he voiced Martian Manhunter back in the old Justice League cartoon in the early 2000s. I love this actor, and so it's cool to see him play this character, a character that I really enjoyed in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and so I'm glad they carried him over into this film as well. There's a couple things I really liked about this movie. One thing I really liked is that it talks about, can people change? It has good messaging on whether or not somebody is really who they have set themselves out to be. Can they change their life path for better or for worse? We see that in Ross trying to be a better person, trying to change this aspect of him, and it's a little jarring because you don't really see this build up to the change in this character. It's also jarring because it's also a new actor playing this character, but it makes total sense. It's not like they just said, nope, he's different and we're going to leave it at that. No, there's conflict with him still. He still kind of goes back to his old ways a little bit, and they also reflect on who he was and how he acted prior to him becoming the president and prior to Harrison Ford taking on this role. So it's really cool seeing that change in this character, and it's believable. Harrison Ford did great with this. I think that's one of the stronger aspects of this movie. Another thing that I thought was really good is this greater connection to the MCU. It's finally pushing the plot forward. We're finally seeing what's the point of all of this, because the Multiverse Saga has been so all over the place. There's not been a lot of connecting threads. They're finally bringing in a lot of connecting threads, pushing the MCU plot forward, the greater cinematic universe side of things, finally going forward. So we're finally talking about the Celestials. We're talking about stuff that happened in the Incredible Hulk. We're pushing everything forward. You go to the post-credits scene, mild spoilers here, but not really big spoilers, but they talk about what's to come with the Multiverse Saga. Not in great detail, but they're hinting towards things to come with what's going to be going down in Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. So there's a lot of good stuff that's leading to where we're going in the future. It's like we're finally setting things up. We're finally going forward. We're finally on the path to Doomsday, on the path to Secret Wars. It's been a little bumpy since Endgame. There's been some great stuff, not so great stuff, but nothing has felt cohesive. That's the worst thing about the Multiverse Saga, is nothing has felt cohesive from one project to the next. I think we're finally in that stage where they're finally tying things together like they should have done a couple years ago, but they're finally doing that now. So I got to applaud this movie for doing that at the very least. There's more mixed and negative, I think, to talk about going forward. So let's just move on to the mixed section of this movie. All right, so what was mixed about Captain America Brave New World? For me, it's got to come down to the reshoots. You can really feel the reshoots in this movie. They went through extensive reshoots. I don't think as extensive as it had initially been reported on, because it was reported that this movie was going to go through 6 months of reshoots. It was basically going to become a whole other thing from what it originated as. That's not true at all. There's a lot of misinformation that came from the production and the restructuring of this movie, because there's a lot of restructuring that happened with this. It was during the writer's strike, during the actor's strike, they had to take a break on filming this movie, and so they retooled a lot of stuff, specifically at Marvel Studios and how things are run over there. So they retooled a lot of stuff, more so on the Disney Plus side, I think, but also on the film side. This movie was kind of caught in the middle, so you feel these dueling tones of what the post-COVID Endgame, Bob Chapek era MCU of quantity over quality. You really feel that here. They didn't really have a good script established from the beginning, so they were trying to piece together what that was versus what the reshoots did, and trying to make this movie something enjoyable and something worth watching, something that's not going to disappoint fans at the end of the day. This movie did disappoint some people, and it disappointed me in some regard too. It's just, there's this dueling aspect. You can really feel that the first act feels in a way like what the old take on this movie was going to be. The second act is kind of this merging of, we have to kind of piece this whole thing together, and that's where you can really feel the reshoots, especially with Giancarlo Esposito's character. He really feels like he's just kind of plopped in there. There's not a lot of context given to his character. He's a member of the Serpent Society, so they paid off that tease they gave us back in 2014 when they announced the next Captain America movie, Captain America 3, was going to be Civil War. It was teased it was going to be Serpent Society first, and then they changed the title at the event at the El Capitan Theater. That was going to be Serpent Society. So they finally talked about Serpent Society. Serpent Society was going to be an even greater part of this movie, I think, before they did the reshoots. Giancarlo Esposito, as much as I love this guy, he is kind of underutilized in this. He's really just put in there because they wanted to replace what they were doing with the Serpent Society. Still had to keep that as an element of the film, but really changed it to, I think, tone it down. I think it was probably going to be a little bit more silly and a little bit more like the costume characters of the Serpent Society that you get in the comics. Kind of tone it down and make it more of just this gun for hire, this mercenary guy. They did that, bringing the Sidewinder character. He's just kind of used as a band-aid over the reshoots, I feel like. A band-aid over this movie, this hodgepodge of ideas, this conglomerate of what the old Brave New World was when it was New World Order. You can really feel the reshoots there where his character is concerned. And then you get to the third act, and that feels like the new stuff they were doing. Now, I think they were always going to utilize Red Hulk Hulk, but they retool some stuff specifically at the very end of the movie concerning Harrison Ford's Ross character. You really feel the change in structure throughout the entire movie. So that's the mixed stuff, is you feel the difference in tone, you feel the difference in the structure. The reshoots are just, it's very piecemeal together. There's a decent plot in there, but it's just so muddled in its structure. I don't have much else to say in the mixed aspect. Let's move on to the negative aspect of this movie. All right, so what didn't work for me for Brave New World? It's got to be, for one, the score. The score is very forgettable, and at times it doesn't even feel like a Captain America score. It doesn't feel like it fits in with the MCU. It doesn't really feel like it fits in with this movie. It hits you over the head when it comes on. Sometimes there's scenes where it needs to play a little more subtly, and it's just boom, it's right in your face, and it kind of takes you out of it from time to time. It did for me in a scene or two. Another thing that really didn't work is the villain plot. Now, this is going to be spoilers. It was teased a few years ago. This character was going to be brought back into the MCU, finally, from the Incredible Hulk. But spoilers, if you didn't know already, the leader comes back, and it's Tim Blake Nelson from the Incredible Hulk. So they finally brought that character back. He's the one behind turning Ross into the Red Hulk. That's pretty clear. It doesn't take you a lot to figure that out, or to figure out that he's the villain of the film. I think he was fine, but he made a lot of dumb decisions. His plan just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That's one of the weaker aspects of this movie. Again, another weak Marvel villain, another weak MCU villain. We've had a lot of them before. So the leader is the villain of this movie. He's the one behind everything, getting the plot in motion. They wanted this movie to be so much like Winter Soldier, but it just feels like a poor man's version of the Winter Soldier. So I wanted this movie to be so much better. The trailer sold this movie as a great espionage thriller, but when you come into it and you watch it, it just doesn't quite land the same way. They're not really treating the audience as intelligent. They kind of treat us as a little dumb, like we shouldn't be able to figure out the plot. It's pretty easy to figure it out from the very beginning of the film. I don't think I was really left wondering, oh, what's going to happen here? How's this all going to play out? It's a very predictable movie, and I just don't think the espionage aspect of this movie quite worked. The action is good, not great. The stuff on the Celestial Island was really cool, and the stuff with Red Hulk and Captain America, that final fight, that was a cool scene too. The stuff with the Black Widow, she had great action sequences as well, but they can feel a little slow at times. I think the editing is a little sloppy. It's not quite as tight as the Winter Soldier, Civil War, or the greater films of Phase 2, Phase 1, Phase 3, that early Infinity Saga era. It's just very sloppy. The plot's very muddled. It's not quite what I was hoping for, but I think there is some stuff to look forward to. This isn't a terrible movie. It's just a little underwhelming. And that's the worst thing about this movie, is it's very underwhelming. It kind of feels like this was a last vestige of the old guard at Marvel Studios, the old way, the Bob Chapek era, and they just kind of wanted to get this movie done, get it out the door, and drop it, because I think everything else coming out from the MCU this year is going to be very, very entertaining, especially concerning the TV side. Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man recently wrapped up. I really enjoyed that show. It was actually quite entertaining, quite good. Daredevil Born Again's about to come out. I think that's going to be a very good show as well. Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four also look very promising. So I think we're finally in that phase of we're going back to the good stuff with the MCU, and not so much the mediocre, muddled stuff. This was a very mediocre, muddled film. There was some good stuff to it, but it just wasn't quite what I was hoping for. Final thoughts on Captain America Brave New World. A very mediocre film, not quite what I was hoping for. I wanted a lot more out of this movie, but it just tries to be so much more than what it actually is. It tries to be this great espionage thriller, tries to call back to the days of Captain America the Winter Soldier and Captain America Civil War. It just doesn't quite hit those beats. I thought the Falcon and the Winter Soldier series was better than this movie is, so it was a little underwhelming, a little disappointing. I wanted more out of this film, but I also enjoyed aspects of it as well. It's not entirely a bad movie, but it's not entirely a good movie either. If I'm going to give this movie a rating, it's got to be a 3 out of 5 or a C+ on the letter scale. It really hits that average mid-level MCU rank, and not so much the highs of the MCU, not the lows of the MCU, but just kind of right there in the middle. Wanted a lot more from this movie, but at least I enjoyed it to an extent. Wanted more out of this movie, but again, it's just kind of one of those last vestiges of the old MCU ways. We're getting back to the good days of the MCU, I think, I hope, but we'll just have to wait and see. Guys, if you've seen Captain America Brave New World, go down in the comment section. Let me know what you thought of this movie. I'd love to hear from you. Before you go, remember to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you get notified when new videos go live on this channel. You guys do that, it always helps me out. I greatly appreciate it. Hope you all have an awesome and a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next video.